It's Monday, July 29th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and you could tell it's a hell of a day to talk ball, and there's real ball happening, sort of real ball-ish, real ball adjacent happening, because joining me to talk ball today is Nate Tice, and he is doing it from a hotel room because he's a big boy going to training camps here. Your first camp with Yahoo, Nate. I am in the Yahoo studio in LA, so real things are happening, Nate. Football is back.
Things are happening. This is very official. This is not our offices where I have posters just laying around. Instead, I have a bed in the background. You know, I'm on the road just to show that I'm on the road and everything. Just landed in Arizona. You know, I'm very curious, you know, what's going on with the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm very excited. That's how I'm starting off. Then going to Minnesota. So Arizona, Minnesota, that's it for my training camp. That's all I get. I get bored of practices. I really do. I'm just like, I don't have a script. I just kind of go, yeah, that's cool. Good play there. All right, cool. I can't see the tackle. I can't see the block there. Who had the sack? All right, awesome. Can't review the film. But no, it's going to be, I'm really excited to kind of just, you said ball adjacent. I'm literally football adjacent because I'm staying across from State Farm Stadium here in Phoenix or Glendale. And yeah, so I feel I am football adjacent right now and juices are flowing.
How many NFL writers do you think would, you know, start a new job like you have with Yahoo here, start your own new podcast, which I can't wait to talk on the podcast tomorrow, Football 301. We're going to be talking about these Arizona Cardinals. How many other NFL writers on planet Earth do you think, like, first training camp they're going to would be, oh yeah, definitely the Arizona Cardinals, fourth pick in the draft last year? Only you, Nate Tice, which is why we love you.
Exactly. I know the ones I asked for, I could tell even my editor, Joey Galino, was like, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think we could do that. Like, sure. Okay. Why? You're the only person who wants to go to New England right now. Okay. Indianapolis was kind of trendy. You know, that was another one I requested, and then Minnesota was just, you know, that was kind of them throwing me a bone. They're like, you're from there, right? Haven't lived there in 17 years, but they're, you just go there. Okay. It's like, I get to check out Sam Darnold. Sure. All right. Maybe a little Brian Flores defense, see how they're kind of doing. You know, see Justin Jefferson in person again. You know, there's some interesting things there. So yeah, they threw me some bones, but the Cardinals is like, that was like 1A, like, of my choices. And they're like, yeah, sure.
Go for it, buddy.
Like, have it. Go for it. You want to drive? Like, yeah, do what you want to do. Like, I'm going here for two practices. I'm excited about their offense. We've talked about it on your pod and a little bit on my pod, and I'm sure we will in the next couple of weeks. And their defense a little bit is interesting. So yeah, the Cardinals they're frisky, and I'm excited to talk about the friskiness a little too much over the next couple of months.
Hell yeah. Well, again, people, if you're listening to this show and you haven't heard, Nate and I do have a podcast. It's his podcast, and I'm just a little bit of part of it. Football 301. Definitely check it out. Subscribe. The episode will be tomorrow, and we will probably talk a lot about what you've seen at Cardinals camp. That's not what we're going to do today, but on this show, as I mentioned, ball adjacent. Football is back. This is like the 100th time we'll say it before week one when football is actually back. So a little bit of programming note there. It's officially fantasy draft season. That's what we can definitely say. And here on the podcast, we're kicking it off this week with Strategy Week. We're going to have a podcast today, Wednesday, and Friday this week. And then starting next week, life is over. No more outside time, no more friends, no more family. Say goodbye to them because the show is 5 days a week on the podcast. I'm here every Monday to Friday, baby. Living the freaking dream. I mean, it's exciting and it is electric. So each week in August, there's going to be a central theme to all the podcasts. This week is Strategy Week. Next week is Rankings Week, Position Previews, followed by Conviction Weeks. And then boom, we end August with Cram Week and we get into the season. And to start off this draft season prep, every Monday, we're bringing back Mock Draft Monday. Not like the mock drafts for the NFL draft, fantasy mock drafts, baby. If you have one good idea, you just got to recycle it and reuse it. So that's what we're doing here with Mock Draft Monday. We're doing our fantasy mock drafts on the website. We're going to go through them here. And Nate was kind enough to join us, fantasy plebes, get down in the muck for a dynasty mock draft. Nate, so that's what we're going to be recapping today. Kind of our five biggest. It could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 cells. Sure, they can put 5 in the title, but we have like 100 mock draft observations from that dynasty mock draft. So, Nate, you got down in the muck with us here for a one quarterback dynasty startup draft. But I know you play dynasty. So what makes dynasty fun in your opinion?
Well, I also, and we didn't do it this way, but dynasty leagues that are super flexes. which making that the quarterback can also play the flex position, and also no defense, no special or defense and special teams, no kicker. It's just position players, skill position players. And what I like about it is I get to use my work. I studied the draft. I write about the draft. I also, in other ways, I'm studying the league week in, week out. So get to kind of use a little bit of that, a little bit of crossover for fantasy. I also just like that element. I like competition, so I there's a lot of it. I love football. I love all the elements of fantasy, but dynasty wise, it's so great because if you do like someone in the draft, it's not, oh, this is it. You just get him for this 1 year. Who cares if you liked him as a rookie? I'm drafting him next year in the first round, or I'm drafting him for $62 when the year before no one even heard of him and I could have gotten him for $2. I was in some keeper leagues, keeper redraft leagues, and I liked those, but it was still, David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell were two of my biggest hits, but it was like by the time I was get to really use them, I was like, okay, that's it. I only got him for 2 or 3 years. So dynasty, at least it's like, if I like Puka Nacua, he's mine. Now that he's mine for as long as I want him. And I like that as someone that really follows the league. I think there's a lot of football fans out there, and it kind of, maybe if you want something a little deeper and a little bit more of like show your work and show how much you like the league, I think dynasty is a kind of good way to do that. Cause it's a different element of really ball knowledge, I would say.
100%. And I'm glad that you introed it that way because, and I am just saying this off the top. I'm not throwing shade at anybody else who does Dynasty content or anybody else who plays Dynasty. Like, you want to do it this way? That's the great part about this. You can play it this way. I do not view it as like collecting value or collecting assets or like this guy has now pushed up into this stratosphere where, oh, now he's a sell high or, something like that because his quote value, his industry value, whatever, people view him higher than where he should be, all this stuff. I just like players, okay? I like players and I like football, and I'm glad we've introduced it that way because to me, that is the fun part about playing this. To me, it's not, okay, I've drafted Drake London, because I was a big fan of him coming out of USC, and now his values reached this point where actually I probably should sell him based on the hype. Like, no, I want it to come to fruition on my team, right? I want to like Drake London and then and hang on to him through the misery, the miserable parts of his first 2 years, and then have it hit in the third year. And I want that to happen on my team because I like the player and I like just the idea of who he is. So that is the fun part about Dynasty. It's a way, Nate, I think, honestly, to appreciate the player aspect of the game even more. Because I don't mean to be all hokey and sentimental, but without the players, we have nothing, right? Like it should be, I always come back to football guys and Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom, the coaching tree in the industry that I come off of, their whole thing was like glory to the players, man, because without those guys, like none of this happens and we don't get to play in this weird little sandbox that we do. So to me, I think actually Dynasty is a way to further that and be more invested in that player appreciation as opposed to just like, well, yeah, this team's going to probably stink this year. They're going to throw the ball a lot in trailing situations. So there might be some value we can scrape off that way. I don't know. To me, again, I think it allows you to get deeper into the player investment aspect of it. And that's why I love this game.
Yeah, and it makes you understand situations a little bit more with teams because like you said, it's not just, all right, we used him for a year. Okay, this guy that I just drafted in the second round this year, I'll never think of him again. If you're just kind of more of a casual plus fan, I'll say. Maybe someone that wants to get a little deeper. Now, like you said, investment in it, especially if there's money involved, you're going to really like players. I mean, shoot, you just see right now with College Football 25 coming back out, is you see people again in dynasty leagues, like, for that version of dynasty, you get attached to players like you do. You're like, and like you said, I'm sure there's so many players that you have, the Nico Collinses of the world, the Rashad Batemans of the world. Like, there's some running backs. Trust me, I have still plenty of shares of, and I'll talk about one of them, but I do think it's fun where you can just draft your dudes. Draft the guy you like. And I think with dynasty is you can make more arguments for it. Well, it's not for this year. It's for, I think the situation will improve next year, or oh no, I know he's older, but hey, I'm going to get 2 good years out of him. I'm going to make all these types of arguments for some of my players that I drafted. So, but I think that's fun with dynasty because you're not just focused on the next 7-8 months. You're focused on the next 7-8 years in some guys' cases. So I think that's I think that's just another element. Like I love that you're saying just focus on the players because as someone even growing up around the game, I think good coaches I've ever been around always just say, well, it's the players. I'm lucky enough to have coached that player kind of fantasy a little bit. It's like I'm lucky enough to have quote unquote owned that player in fantasy, which is I think a fun element.
100%, man. I remember the Play Callers podcast that Jordan Rodriguez did over the Athletic.
Yeah.
And like listening, well,
So
yeah,
good.
number one is great. And even though it was done last year, it would still hold up if you haven't listened to it. I know I've referenced it on the show before. But Mike McDaniel, who's like one of the biggest schemers on the scheme boards on the planet, right? And I think we did the top 10 offenses on Football 301, and we were just like, yeah, gotta hand it to him. Like we didn't even do like a full breakdown on them, despite the fact that we all kind of had them as a universally great offense. And I think a lot of it is because we appreciate just how much creativity goes into putting that offense together and the things they throw at defenses that are really tough to defend in September and October and into November, maybe just a little bit. But even
hopefully a lot of home games in December there.
But even Mike McDaniel, the guy who puts that offense together that is so interesting schematically, on that podcast, he's constantly coming back to, play callers think they get it in their head, it's all about them. It's not about us at all. Like, it's about the players. And like, he would do like halftime interviews, and I always come back to one on Sunday Night Football. I can't remember the game, but the sideline reporters like, Mike, what did you do in the first half? He's like, well, I didn't do anything, but the guys on the field did this, that, and the other. So yeah, I mean, I always try to make that the central ethos of this podcast, even as we're talking about this game about a game. It should always be focused on the players. And you're so right that you get that extra level of investment in it. And sometimes, if you're me, you take a Sky Moore and you're like, hey, it's not going to work this year, but year 2, that's when it's really, this is the year. And then it's not the year, but hopefully for some guys along the way, it really does become that. But okay, let's dive into our specific teams, Nate, before we go into some kind of our bigger picture thoughts. I want to talk about your team first, because you drew the first overall pick.
Yeah.
Great start. Justin Jefferson. I don't think anybody can argue with that. Then in the second round, you go Josh Allen. I'll just read off your team here. Justin Jefferson, Josh Allen, Nico Collins, Trey McBride, Kyron Williams, Rashad White, Ramondre Stevenson, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Polk, Drake May, of course, James Conner, Dallas Goedert, Jerome Ford, and then you finish off with Tyler Lockett. Just
wah wah.
Okay, talk about appreciating the players. Let's be respectful to my guy, Tyler Lockett. I know. Just big picture thoughts on your team and some of the ways you approached it here.
If anyone has seen any of my previous work, there was a lot of, like you said, after Drake May, of course. There was a few of those type of guys, of course. Rashad White, of course. Zach Charbonnet, kind of course. A little bit of A.D. Mitchell as well. I drafted a lot of the guys I like, and a lot of them thankfully kind of matched up maybe value wise, which is always, it's going to be arbitrary what you consider it. I thought Justin Jefferson right off the bat was kind of an easy 1-1 pick, youth production. I'm not even worried about who's under quarterback. I love it because I think the play call is good. I think the offensive line is pretty good, which I also is always one of the things that can kneecap a receiver's production. Quarterback can't throw the ball in his back. I had a question for you though. Is there any merit? I know the kind of typical 1-1s right now are maybe Jefferson, CD Lamb, maybe CMC or something. Maybe if you're in a super flex, maybe some of the quarterbacks, of course. Is there any merit to Bijan Robinson at 1-1? I was that was actually the only other guy I considered. Maybe CD a little bit as well, but I actually looked at Bijan just because of you don't get a lot of bell cow running backs, and you have youth, you have draft pedigree, you have offensive situation short term, and he's kind of situation proof, depending what you want. So I don't know. That was the only other guy I kind of considered. I know it's kind of like that would be a kind of a leap of faith, but that was one I wanted to throw at you. Is like, is there any arguments for that right now? But just because of what the receivers you can find right now, and as opposed to the running backs you can find right now.
So it's a great question. And if I was a better podcast host, I would have just said that this was a 10-team, one quarterback dynasty startup. I should have probably said that off at the top, but I say that to say that Bijan did go in the first round of our draft. He was the 5th pick overall. So the first 5 picks were Justin Jefferson to Nate, then CeeDee Lamb to Tara Roberts, Jamar Chase to Dan Titus. Scott Pianowski took Amon-Ra St. Brown at the 4th pick, and then Bijan was the 5th pick, the first running back to Kate Majuk. So, I mean, it's not far off. I do think that there's an argument for it because just the running back position is so scarce. And if you just look at what happened last year with Bijan and what I think we all kind of agree was probably like a worst case scenario, well, not a totally worst case scenario, but
kind of the floor.
I think we're all hoping for sure the floor, and people kind of view it as it was a bust of a season for him as a first round pick, sort of, but he was the ninth highest scoring running back in fantasy last year.
I was gonna say, yeah, it was
perfectly fine.
Yeah,
and we all agree that there's a higher ceiling. So I think definitely by the end, and this is the great part about Dynasty, is if in fantasy in general, you should always be kind of skating to where the puck is going. But especially in Dynasty, you kind of have to think not as far out as some people imagine, but at least like, what is this draft going to look like 1 year from today? And I certainly think that there could be an argument that Bijan is there. For me personally, though, I just think, number one, as the lead representative of big receiver, I am going to advocate for the receivers here. But also, I do think they're a little more stable, obviously, a little more ecosystem proof. And I mean, your guy Jefferson taking him at the top here of the the three receivers that followed him. I know the Dak and the Cowboys situation is weird at 2, but Burrow at 3 with Jamar Chase, Goff and St. Brown are locked together in a great offensive ecosystem for a while. Even Jefferson there probably is the most like volatile quarterback situation of the 4 receivers that went here.
Yeah, for me, it was just, I love the player because I think he's the guy, even though there's a ton of talented receivers. It was the combo of youth, the combo of the Dak situation is just so scary to me. And just that's also the Cowboys right now are reconfiguring their offensive line. Is McCarthy out after this season? Like, because there's just a lot of question marks with the Cowboys in general, even if I'm like, I love CD. Like these two guys are two of my favorite players, period, in the league. And so I was just looking at that, I was like, I just seen Jefferson's highs, and Jefferson's mid-level to me is just so much higher, if that makes sense. CD2, they used him more outside last year as an X receiver. I always say when they did put him on the outside, they targeted him more. I believe that's kind of how they distincted a little bit differently. So he's more of a slot guy and everything. That's going to just always have a natural floor and a natural ceiling. I don't know how else to kind of describe it. Like there's a buffer zone for like that kind of role, while Jefferson being that true X, like I see more kind of touchdowns going his way, more like he's going to have the natural production because his natural outside winning ability kind of just his role aligns to that. That's just kind of the argument I made for myself. The Amon-Ra St. Brown Goff thing is just kind of, again, it's like, I kind of know what this is. And it's like, it's so heavily designed. What if Ben Johnson goes away? What if the offensive line falls apart, like because of injuries? And I mean, I know they just signed Decker again, but what if the guards fall apart? What if Ragnar retires? He's always on the cusp of an injury retirement. So those are kind of question marks I have about the Lions long term. And then just Jamar Chase and everything, he's holding out. Joe Burrow have now there's some injury stuff now with him. Does the offense drop off without T. Higgins? I don't think it will. I think you get more Chase focus, but just the volatility of that situation too is kind of what that I thought there was more question marks there. Maybe not this year, maybe there are some this year, but maybe just even next year. And so in the weirdest way, I just came back to, for me, it was Kevin O'Connell. Like, because I've seen just now different quarterbacks play there and they're still able to find production. The run game has improved, which was the big question mark for them and before, and that kind of led to some limitations with Jefferson because defense could focus on that. So because they've found more real football answers, because he is signed to this contract now, I think he'll be hurrying back from injuries as opposed to what he did before. So I just, those kind of line me up, maybe feel better. Maybe this year's a little, maybe not the 100% Jefferson production. Maybe it is with Darnold. I do like Darnold. I really do. I'm saying
I know you're a Darnold sicko, but the reports out of camp have actually been good.
Sicko. Been great. I know. And I'm going there this week. So I'm actually curious to see. So, and I know there's, JJ McCarthy as well, but that's more of a long-term thing, but they have investment there. So I don't know. I just think that this 1, 3, 5 year, what I kind of looked at for fantasy guys, 1, 3, 5 years, it all looks okay for Jefferson because at 5 years, he's 30. That like, this is a good window to take him.
I mean, listen, he's the best receiver in the league and you took him with the first pick. I don't think that anybody can really fight you there, and look, I don't think this is a hot take for me to say, but he would probably be my favorite to lead the league in target share this year, just because either way, one, he's got your boy Sam Darnold there. I think if he's under center, he's got just like a total F-it guy who's going to just tunnel vision. Much like the Nick Mullins games last year. I think it will be very similar to that. But probably even, I'm not a Darnold sicko like you, but even I would admit probably a better version than what Nick Mullins offered. And then if it's McCarthy under center, I think you're looking at a simplified offense that is a little more designery and probably strictly tries to feed the number one target a lot of first read looks. I think there's a good chance he leads the NFL in target share this year. So I don't think anybody could fight you on your first pick there. Just one little group of players I wanted to ask you about before I talk about my team here. Your rounds 5 to 7 picks. Kyron Williams at 5.01, Rachaad White at 6.10, and Ramondre Stevenson at 7.01. Talk me through this group of players here, because I think these three guys are all interesting because they're still on the original teams that drafted them. They're all relatively young. We talked about Ramondre Stevenson back when we did the who could be the king of the running back dead zone this year. The king of the running back dead zone last year was Rachaad White. So it's an interesting group of players. Just kind of talk me through your process of these guys. And I would say they're a little bit volatile, but because all of them could be replaced at some point because they're not truly established. But at the same time, I could see them being value jumpers in a couple of years.
Size, touches, snaps. That's my formula here is guys, except for Kyren Williams doesn't really fit that, but guys that are going to be on the field for a lot of snaps and a lot of roles. So they get natural touches. I think Kyren Williams is kind of different than I think the other two. Even though, there's some offensive similarities, but that's a different discussion. Not getting Blake Corum kind of ruined this plan for me. He got sniped right before I was about to take him, and that kind of ruined a little bit of what I was kind of going for here because I want the Rams backfield. They want to have the same back there every single snap. That is just Sean McVay preference. That is what the offense is going to be. They're going to run a lot of screens for him. They're going to give him a lot of touches in the run game because they believe in that and having the same personnel out there with a lot of run to start the offense off. So I think he's guaranteed that 15 to 20 touches a game. Like it's just how that offense is. His downside is that he's 194 and he's been hurt multiple times already, college and now as a pro. That's why I want to core him. So that's why I wanted to buy that offense. And it kind of got a little rocked for me. But the Rachaad White, Ramondre Stevenson kind of back-to-back was I'm buying bell cows. That's just something I buy. That's just what I go for. These guys are going to play 3 downs. They're going to get touches. They're going to play in offenses that are going to look to run first and boot off of those looks. That's what both of these offense coordinators want to do. Stevenson also got paid. So I think there's at least an investment for 2 years here. Backs, you can't go past 3 years. It's just impossible. I think if you're going past 3 years, that's fool's errand. So Stevenson for at least 2 years, I feel good about. And then maybe get to 3, but at least these next 2 years with what the offense is going to be, I think they have a lot of blocking receivers. I know we joke about that, but that matters for a guy like Stevenson because he's going to get an extra couple cheap yards, I think, every touch. He can catch the ball a little bit, at least cheap stuff, some screen stuff. I think he's getting a lot of short yardage stuff because of his size. So just the high usage role. And then same with Rachaad White, same Rams offense, high usage, high touches to the running back. Their backup, Spucky Irving, doesn't worry me too much because he's a little smaller. And they've already kind of spoken out that it's kind of Rachaad White's kind of backfield. So for me, backs are just so hard to find. And if you have an advantage of even just one guy that's a true bell cow, top 3, top 4 guy, which all these guys could be at least, I think, in the next 2 years, I think that's just such an advantage, especially if you have Jefferson. I had Jefferson on my team. I had Josh Allen on my team. So I think I have a quarterback and a receiver 1 advantage on most weeks. So if I can get a running back 1 type there, it's like I think every week for at least 2 years, I got pretty kind of good menu to work with from these positions.
Even I don't want to talk too much Cardinals because I do think we'll talk about it on Football 301 tomorrow. But even with Trey McBride in the 4th round there, you got a guy that should be, at least looks positioned to be like a top 3 fantasy tight end this year and for multiple years to come. So you have like top 3 guys at 3 positions: quarterback, running back, or quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end. So then I think collecting these kind of a little bit volatile, like not completely sturdy ground running backs, but guys who could be those bell cows, I think makes a lot of sense. Okay, I want to talk through my team here for a little bit, but let's take a quick break and then we'll come back to that and some more wide view thoughts. All right, Nate, here's my team by round. I had the 8th pick, again, 8 out of 10. So 1.08, I went Garrett Wilson. Then I went Drake London, Travis Etienne, DeVonta Smith, Mark Andrews, Brian Thomas Jr., Jackson Smith-Njigba, Deontay Johnson, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Jermaine Burton, Justin Herbert, Josh Downs, David Njoku, Michael Wilson, and then my 16th round pick was just like, let me throw a dart at Tyrone Tracy. I don't know a damn thing about Tyrone Tracy other than he is a rookie that some people think is exciting. Yeah.
He is. He's fun. He's got like a Diet Coke David Johnson. Like that's his selling point. His former receiver that turned into a running back, got some size and speed.
On a shaky depth chart. I'll take it.
On a shaky depth chart. That buying shaky depth charts is, hey, that's a real dart throw. That's like a one to actually hit the board.
So I don't know what your thoughts about my team are, but I do just want to say my first pick here, Garrett Wilson. Let me just admit this, I went against my own rankings here because if I go off my actual personal dynasty rankings, and I waffled on this in the moment and finally just went ahead and clicked Wilson here. But technically my rankings would tell you to take AJ Brown ahead of Garrett Wilson. And I did hate myself for doing it, but I also don't hate myself for doing it because I just think Garrett Wilson is on that rocket ship trajectory. Such a great player. Obviously the situation hasn't been great there, but it might be a little aggressive to take him here at the 8th overall pick ahead of a guy that again, AJ Brown, I think is as established an elite receiver as you can get in the league. But yeah, that's just kind of my thought process there. I will just say, me personally, listeners, viewers, it's okay to go against your own rankings, and certainly okay to go against my rankings at times too. When you just want to do it sometimes, and all things are close enough. I think they're both great players. So that was the one kind of problem I had. But I'll tell you what, Nate, I'll let you tell me what you think about this team. I really like this team as well, and this is as picture perfect of how I approach dynasty startups as you could possibly get.
Of course, talk about I'm always going to like players of mine that I like drafted. That's DeVonta Smith, who I think is just going to always be a steady Eddie. And like, I think just his production is just always going to be good. Like, and even like just you're always going to be able to rely on him, even if there's other receivers in that offense. So the fact you took him in the 4th round, along with another guy like Drake London in the 2nd round, along with the Garrett Wilson, I just think you had a nice little mix there where you have guys that legitimately, could play like a receiver 1 on a given week. And now you have 3 that can all hit in the same week. And I think all are in steady offensive like production, at least for, I think, Garrett Wilson this year. Right? After this year, it's a little, or maybe after 2 years. I don't care how long Aaron Rodgers is saying he's playing for. I think that's just always going to hold your hat, but he's so talented. Like, even doesn't matter who was playing quarterback, you can just see his talent. Like, I've become such a bigger fan of his than I was as a prospect because he's hit so much more. He's had so much more nuance and layers to his game than he had before. I liked the fact that you freaking sniped Justin Herbert in the 12th round. The fact that I took a quarterback at 2.10, and you took him at 12.03. And I consider these guys both being elite quarterbacks. I know, but even fantasy production wise, I think Herbert's going to surprise some people. I don't think he's going to be great this year production wise because it's just the offense and who they're throwing. I think he's going to get more touchdowns than people realize because they're going to design stuff. Harbaugh's offense is going to be heavily designed, but that's a good thing. That means those are shot plays for touchdowns, not just 8-yard gains and dink and dunk. So might be as much usage, but better usage or more efficient usage for him. So I don't know. I like that. Maybe because I have him in like 3 dynasty leagues, and so I'm talking myself into it. So yeah, but I like that pick a lot. I
mean, I have Josh Allen on like every single good dynasty team that I have, so we're on the same page here with the quarterback. And I knew that
it's really fun. It's really fun having Josh Allen on your team.
It's really great. I will say also, I knew we would have some receiver similarity here because I think you and I just kind of look at the position the same way. I know we've shared a lot of the same thoughts, but it's interesting that you pulled on both of those two ones, DeVonta Smith and then the quarterbacks, because actually those are 2 of my kind of big picture thoughts. So let's dive into those a little bit here. First of which is the quarterback positional overview. And I did think it was interesting, Nate, because I think you were the first person to take a quarterback, and I was the last person to take a quarterback. So I'll just read off the quarterbacks here and where they went. 2.10, as Nate said, he took Josh Allen. And remember, this is a 1 quarterback league. No super flex, no 2 quarterback. Jalen Hurts went to Tara at the 3rd round, 2nd pick there. Producer Colin, God bless him, made his vanity content pick here. Whew. Every single mock draft, I think producer Colin, just listeners will know that he's trying to goad Andy into making fun of him in the recap, which I'm not sure if Andy did or not, but I'm sure if he was on the pod, he would do it. So I have to say that here. Anthony Richardson, 4.02, very, very aggressive. Got to respect him for taking one for team content there. 5.06, Andy took Patrick Mahomes. 5.07, CJ Stroud went to Mo. 5.10, Lamar Jackson went to Jason Klobaka. 7.03, Kyler Murray. 7.05, Jaden Daniels. 10.07, Joe Burrow. 11.06, Caleb Williams. Andy took a 2nd quarterback. I still hadn't taken a 1st at this point. Colin then took a 2nd quarterback in the 12th round at 12.02. And then I took my 1st quarterback, 12.03 at Justin Herbert there. And I think this is what's like, listen, I'm with you. It's fun to have Josh Allen on your fantasy team and just lock that spot down. And as long as he's playing football and his body is going to hold up, he is probably going to compete to be the quarterback 1. But this is also, I think, the value of waiting in a single quarterback dynasty league. I feel great about the guy I got. And I don't know if I fully want to have this conversation here because I actually might want to have this with you tomorrow on the Take Shopping episode we're going to do. But I do think the Chargers offense is being slept on right now.
I do too. They invested at O-line. They're going to pound that freaking rock, and it's going to be good stuff. Like, they're very sound. It's not going to be a sexy offense. Like, people are going to be bored because there's fullbacks and tight ends out there, and maybe they don't recognize the receiver names. Are like, oh, Quentin Johnston's a bust. Ha ha ha. They can't throw the ball. This offense is going to be hyper efficient. It's not going to be sexy, and it's not going to have they're not going to blow the doors off statistically, I don't think, but it's going to be I think it's just going to be a sound offense. And I agree. They're going to be I don't want to say a good bad team, but they're going to be a team that beats bad teams. That's how I view the Chargers. They're going to be that kind of, in wrestling, they kind of have a wrestler that's like, he's kind of the one that is the gatekeeper for you to get to, like, okay, you can now fight for the Intercontinental Championship or the Heavyweight Championship. That's what they feel like to me. It's like, you can't fight for the Heavyweight Championship until you beat the Chargers a little bit. But this is curious because I had the turn there at 210. And this is where being in my first single quarterback dynasty league kind of threw me off, because I'm like, okay, when do I start it? Okay, I know when I kind of start maybe looking at this in a real redraft league. Okay, maybe here. Like, that's kind of what I was kind of like. And then this is Josh Allen. I'm going to take him. I really like him because maybe the next time when I get to the turn, Mahomes won't be there. And he was, which had me kind of crying a little bit, not going to lie. But I had the turn there, and I was deciding between 3 players. Sam Laporta, because I wanted a tight end advantage and a young guy and who I know can get production, Josh Allen and Nico Collins. Though I wanted 2 of those 3. Then it became, I'm taking Nico Collins because I know you love him, but also just youth, everything, production already, future production, quarterback, offensive system, everything. So I lined up perfectly. I'm giddy. I got him. So it was Allen or Laporta. I end up going with, I want the QB advantage. He's maybe a little more of a sure thing even to me. Does Laporta have injury stuff? He had some stuff in college. He's going to be banged up. He has a lot of high use, all that stuff. So that's what was the tiebreaker for me. But then maybe quasi reached for Trey McBride a little later, but I liked it. I ended up kind of talking myself into that actually worked out as well. But the quarterback run, I had no idea how to figure out. I just decided to start it rather than getting stuck with maybe a guy I was unhappy about. But then looking at how it broke down, maybe I would have changed some things, maybe redoing this.
Yeah, it's not perfect. Like, again, I don't think there's a wrong answer here. I don't think taking Josh Allen to be your fantasy quarterback is wrong. And listen, there were some picks in the 3rd round after you took him that I don't love. I don't necessarily think like all these guys should have been valued. Like, there's some more volatile assets there for sure. So if you're just looking at a guy that you're just setting and forgetting for pretty much, again, as long as he is playing football, most likely in Josh Allen, I totally understand that logic. And honestly, like, the Sam Laporta thing is interesting. He was the first tight end taken 3.04 by Scott Pianowski. And the second tight end was you all the way later with Trey McBride at 4.10. But I don't necessarily view Laporta as just number 1 tight end with a bullet, going forward. I think that could be a closer battle than that.
I agree. I think, again, there's the Ben Johnson factor. And there's a lot of good play callers in the league, but he's just always that threat he's going to leave. And it's just such a hyper designed offense. It's a sniper offense. Like, that's what it is. They line you up and they find that perfect weak point. They get you, okay, we have this play call from the 20 to 25 yard line. Oh, we're on the left hash. Let's call it. Boom, touchdown. Sweet. Woo. Does that stick if Johnson leaves? So that's why I just, in my head, how they use Laporta is perfect. How they use St. Brown is perfect. Does that stay perfect once Johnson leaves? So that's why, dynasty-wise, I have a little hesitation, just a tad, that I still think these guys are good, very good players, but they get dinged a little bit once the play caller leaves?
Listen, I'm not begrudging anybody for taking any Lions players in this dynasty draft because,
I love them all.
And I don't necessarily think we need to flesh this out. But again, one of my other thoughts for this was, as Andy wrote in the mock draft recap on the site, you're allowed to try to win the championship this year. Yeah, you're allowed to do that. Yeah. And as Andy said, weirdly, this fact is overlooked by many longtime dynasty players. You should never get so caught up in wish casting some far off future run of consecutive championships that you completely ignore the current season. Someone's going to win this year's title. It might as well be you. And I think taking Lions this year is a great strategy. And frankly, we're sort of picking nits here, really, because Ben Johnson leaves. Like, how far can these guys really fall? I don't think they'll all be disasters. But again, the Laporta specific conversation is interesting because, Nate, he has 120 targets as a rookie in 17 games last year. Do you think it is more likely that he has more than 120, or it's more likely that he has fewer than 120 next year? Like, if Jameson Williams is taking a step forward and all these guys are staying the same, I do think that's worth the conversation.
I think fewer. I also think that their defense has improved, so it's not so many shootouts. So, and also they can maybe play more ball control because of that, and also which they want to do. That's like their offensive philosophy first. So I think that's the thing. It was that offensive ecosystem last year led to him getting a bunch of targets because it was all around St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs choice routes, and like Laporta routes. Yeah. Like, and it was just a perfect offense for those guys to succeed, and they did a great job. I love the point that you guys are bringing up about that some maybe guys on the tail end of their career, maybe Devontae Adams or Mike Evans, maybe are the best. Mike Evans, I think, is the best example of this. People just kind of, he goes way later than maybe he should in dynasty leagues because everyone's like, well, he's going to tail off now. Well, if he tails off with 1,100 yards and a handful of touchdowns, that's a good. That'd be an exciting second year for a receiver. So it's like the curve goes up and then back down. So just because a guy's on year 3 could be year 3 from his retirement going on the other way. So of that curve. So that I'm glad that we got to talk about that because I feel like some of those guys, if you thread that needle where you take them at that right spot, oh my God, you get a receiver 1 or running back 1 when valued dynasty wise as way lower than that. So good.
No, there's point. And you can screw yourself by doing this, and I have definitely screwed myself by doing this, like hanging on to veterans too long and all of that stuff. Oh, definitely done that. So I get it, but at the same time, this is funny, but somebody tried to come to my door and sell me solar a couple of months ago. Oh, right. And I won't get too deep into it, basically, but the pitch was, your bill is going to be higher right now than it is currently. If you go through this solar program and yada yada, solar bros, feel free to tell me I'm wrong about this, but this was this guy's pitch. Yeah, your bill's going to be higher right now, but in 10 years, when the price of electric goes up, you will be saving money. Then I'm like, 10 years? Okay, 10 years from now, Matt can worry about that bill. But like right now, Matt doesn't want to pay $100 more a month for the solar. And that's similar to how I feel about these dynasty players. Like, yes, at some point, this guy's going to age out for me. But if he can help me right now, I care much more about current Matt's problems and my dynasty team than tomorrow's Matt's problems. And I get like that has screwed me before, but typically that is the way I have approached dynasty and some of these aging players. I do want to talk about DeVonta Smith, who you mentioned here, because he fit into a very interesting bucket of wide receivers. And this was another one of my observations here. This 4.03 to 4.07 run on wide receivers, I did think was very fascinating. I'll read off these players, and I just kind of want you to tell me what you think about this bucket of guys, because they're a little similar to that running back group that I think could be a little volatile, could go one way or another. DeVonta Smith, who I took, then Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Rashee Rice. Fascinating run of guys here, Nate. Yeah. And in a way, I think, like, to me, I don't know if you disagree, but to me, when I look at those group of players, DeVonta Smith is definitely the best, but I also think he's kind of the most boring in a way. And I want to have a conversation about him, but just that group specifically, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, he's of the real football wise, he's probably the best one as well. I think he's the best route runner, best hands. He's the outlier to me. I know me and you both go to the church of size for receivers. Like that's kind of what we pray at. And I just always say he's the one guy that's not my usual type because he just plays big and he's so smooth and everything. So production, I totally get what you mean. Production wise, he's kind of boring because that's what it kind of feels like, right? 1,100 yards. Like again, like that's kind of what his kind of ceiling feels like. But I think that's what he is as a player. He's steady as they come because his hands are so good. He's so reliable at everything. I think everything with Tank Dell and Zay Flowers, as much as I like them, is just hype and just everyone saying to the moon. I think those guys are always going to have natural caps on them because of size. I just think that they're just always going to have natural touch limitations because of that. I think Zay Flowers was exceptional last year in his role. But I'm just trying to figure out what he is long term. I don't think he is a 1 long term. I think he's a good 2. Kind of and I think Tank Dell is kind of that. I view him kind of the same way. I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I kind of view them in the same way. Pickens, I kind of know what he is. He's kind of, again, a guy that I view more as a 2, ideally. You'd wish someone maybe work with him. He's kind of a ball winning X. I think that this offense might be okay for him because he can be a traditional X in it, but he's going to be kind of a touchdown dependent guy. He's not a great route runner. He's good at very vertical routes, outside routes. So he's going to have a specific type hit. Like you hope for a DK Metcalf type trajectory with him. They're not the same type of player, but the same kind of limitations and everything. But then also, like, I don't know. I kind of know what he is. I kind of know what his ceiling is, kind of know what his floor is. But I like Rashee Rice a lot. It's just that they use him so differently than I viewed him at SMU, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around him. I'm still trying to figure it out. I really am. But watching him in camp right now, he looks really good. The court case stuff seems like it's going to be at the tail end of the season. I know that's just for this year. But if I had to rank him, I would go DeVonta Smith and then Rice. I would actually have him too. He's playing with Patrick Mahomes. And I love CJ Stroud. I love Lamar, but I don't know. I think his role is kind of bulletproof for their future. If Travis Kelce moves on, but Hollywood Brown's just a rental, and Xavier Worthy's a totally different role than Rice. And I think this offense, an Andy Reid offense, is always going to have that underneath stuff. So like his talent, his quarterback, his system, I think that all of that just matches to more a guy I would rank higher.
Yeah, this is where it's tough with Dynasty, and like you can kind of get yourself in a brain pretzel here, because I actually think if I was to just rank these players, which I did rank these players, actually, Nate.
I was going to say, hey, wait, I think you do, don't you?
I do rank these players, and I actually did this for a piece. I don't know if you saw this on the website, but I did my top 15 wide receivers, 25 and under. So I actually, on that list, I had Rice ranked last. I went, DeVonta Smith was 10. I had Tank Dell at 12. I had Zay Flowers at 14 and George Pickens at 15. So Rashee Rice was kind of in the next honorable mention group. Yeah. But that's real life. And in Dynasty, you can definitely, you should mostly bet on talent, but I do think role is also a big part of this too. And what he did last year, he was so good, Rashee Rice, and was so efficient in, that I have started to think like, man, he might be a big value this year for sure, because of the court case stuff might be pushed off the whole thing. But also just real life, if he's going to hold that role down and they don't necessarily get another guy in there that's a true number one receiver, which I like Xavier Worthy, but I don't necessarily view him as that guy. He could end up being like just a guy that gets 120 targets every year. And it's not the sexiest 120 targets. It's not a, Garrett Wilson type or whatever, but he does kind of stay in that block for a long time.
Yeah, because I think his average depth of target will never be high. So like it's just he's gonna be the king crosser, like he's gonna be the yak guy, and I think it's in that offense. That's why I like it. In most offenses, I'd be like, whatever. This guy's 800 yards and move on with your life. 900 yards, move on with your life. But it's like this offense, depending how many tackles he breaks, like he could take a lot of these 3-yard, 5-yard catches a long ways because he's so special with the ball in his hands. Tank Dell, Zay Flowers are way better at being receivers. Like they actually have route running ability and feel and way friendly to the quarterback. Rice is probably the most talented. It's just that he is way rawer than these other guys, just because of size and speed combination. So, like how you ranked him, like real life thing, that's kind of if I were coaching these guys up, I'd be like, oh, Rice has got a lot to work on, but it's like you channel a little bit of that. They could be pretty explosive. This is actually why I ended up picking McBride, was because DeVonta Smith and Rice were the two other receivers I wanted to take here, and you guys sniped them right before I picked McBride at 410. The other guy I was looking at was DJ Moore. We just talked about tail ends of prime and going into prime. He's smack dab in his prime, and he's productive. And I think this offense is going to be chucking the rock for the next 5 years as long as Shane Waldron's there. So that and Caleb Williams are there. So that was one I feel like he keeps kind of getting underrated, even just in real life a little bit.
Yeah, too. I mean, he went as wide receiver 27. DJ Moore did in this draft. If you look at like Dynasty League football, ADP, their startup ADP, which is my favorite resource to kind of get the quote value of players. He's wide receiver 18. That's a pretty significant value there to get DJ Moore. And I agree. Like DJ Moore could be better than all of those dudes we just talked about for the next 3 years. And I would be 0% surprised. I just want to close the loop on DeVonta Smith here, because I do think it's interesting where this is the difficult part about Dynasty and the receivers specifically. I get in some fun conversations in my reception perception Discord about the receivers and sort of like how do you graduate into that difference maker tier in fantasy, and how do you get into that tier 1 of players and all this stuff. A lot of it is talent. A lot of it is also environment, but I think talent and how good you are at football is the biggest thing. And typically, Nate, I'm curious your opinion on this. When do you kind of start to think that we've seen this guy for X amount of years, we start to know who they are? Because when I ranked those receivers, top 15 under 25 and under, DeVonta Smith was a little bit difficult for me because I'm a huge fan of his game. And in the year prior, I had him, I think at 6 when I did the exercise before. This year, I had him at 10. And people were pissed at were about it generally and also pissed at me because I think a lot of people know I'm a big fan of DeVonta Smith, but I just think there are other guys that have passed him up at this point. And I wonder if there is is there another level for him to go, or is he just a very, very good high-end number 2? I think that's it. So just again, to read off the list, I went Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think everybody was fine with that. The next group of players, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Puka Nacua, Drake London, then DeVonta Smith. That's where people were pissed at me. Honestly, I think 9 to 12 to me, which was London, Smith, Olave, Tank Dell. That's kind of throw it in a hat, whatever. I don't care. Honestly, all the way up to Jalen Waddle, I think you could put that in a group. But people were upset about that. But so again, my question to you in that ramble was, when do you start to view like we've seen this guy for X amount of years, this is the highest he can go, or is there real no answer there?
Oh wow, that's a great question. For DeVonta specifically, it's just so hard because AJ Brown's there. And then how that offense works, they play ISO ball. So it's Jalen Hurts is going to pick one, and that's whoever wins. That's how he's going to go. So it's always going to get diced up. I think I have him right now. I think even maybe, I think the general consensus is maybe he's in the same tier football wise as like a Michael Pittman, but I think Smith, you can ask more of. So I think I don't think he has the talent to be a true blue top 5, top 6 ace of an offense, but I think he can be that mid-tier one where he could take the load as the ace, or take the primary workload and target share of an offense, but he would need another 2 with him. I love DeVonta Smith. I think he truly has Pro Bowl level talent, but maybe not all pro talent. I think maybe if that's a good way to kind of split it up. And I know that's kind of splitting hairs, but that's how I view him. So maybe in more of I think he's a tier 2 receiver if I'm breaking it down. That's and I feel, and I think generally it was year 3, especially once a player finished their 3rd year, you knew what they were. I think that's the general kind of idiom for a lot of coaches and scouts is year 3. I've kind of gone to, once we hit, and this kind of matches this, is once you hit 50 starts. That's kind of when I feel like, okay, this is the guy. This is what I know they can and can't get away with. But that also takes, especially with receivers, their whole offensive ecosystem, no team situation matters for production. But I think as talent level, as far as like, if you just, I know there's sometimes overlap and sometimes it's separate. It's like, he is a 1 to me. It's just that I don't think he'll ever get to showcase that he's a true blue 1. It's just, but there's a difference between being elite 1 and a 1. And I know there's a lot of 1s and 2s and numbers I just threw out in there, but it's just a long-winded way to think. I think he could take more. I just don't think he'll ever be able to showcase it just because of where the Eagles are at right now.
Yeah, I think I pretty much view it the same way. And that's how I bucket receivers too. People that follow my work know this. I think there's like 3 tiers of top receivers. There's the elite group, which should be a small select group. But I do think, and this is where it's tough with DeVonta Smith, I agree with you. I think he's in tier 2, but I think he's a little bit towards the bottom of tier 2 because I think tier 2 has just gotten fatter. Like that group of receivers in the league.
Tier 2 is huge. Yes.
Garrett Wilson is definitely in that tier to me at this point. I think Nico Collins, if you don't think he's in that tier, you didn't watch him play last year, period, end of story. Yep. I think Jalen Waddle's in that tier, and I want to talk about Puka here in a second, so put a pin in that, but I also think he's in that tier. And then Drake London too. That was definitely the one that people hated, and I get that you're just looking at production and everything like that. But at the same time, I think by the end of this year, he will be firmly established in that tier 2. While I think the reason I ended up going with those guys ahead of Smith, I just think he perfectly exemplifies this. That once we get to the year 3 part, I think he's stable as that tier 2 receiver. I don't know if he's going to jump to tier 1. Whereas I can envision scenarios where Garrett Wilson jumps to tier 1. I can envision scenarios where Drake London maybe if he takes an improvement as an individual player, jumps to tier 1. And I think I can see that with Puka. And I think that makes a good transition because I want to ask you about him specifically. He was the final pick of the first round here, 1.10. He went to Jason Klobaka. He was wide receiver 7. I just kind of want to ask you about what's your opinion about him as a player. We all get he had a great rookie season, production-wise, unbelievable. I do think some people would be surprised that, he went behind Marvin Harrison Jr. He went behind Garrett Wilson. And I'll throw it to you this way, Nate. And if Marvin Harrison Jr. had the season that Puka just had as a rookie, there is a 0.0% chance he would be the final pick in the first round. He'd be more likely to be the first pick overall in a dynasty mock draft. So are we still holding draft capital or pre-draft thoughts against Puka Nacua, or is there something as an individual player? I don't want to talk shit about Puka, okay, because he's a great player. But just like, is there something about him as a player, or maybe the ecosystem, that you think puts him maybe towards the bottom of this first round as opposed to like the first 3 picks?
Yeah, I actually consider him in real football terms. I think him and Amon-Ra St. Brown should. I kind of consider them the same. High end, they're more high end tier 2 guys to me. They have to be designed some things, and really stylistically they're very similar. Even if you wouldn't think it at first, they really are. They're both power slots naturally, but they do everything. They're triple threats. They can rush the ball a little bit. They do the dirty work, and they can get open, especially from the slot, through power. It's power and body control is how they win. I don't consider him that true blue 1 because I don't ever picture St. Brown or Nacua, not to like drag St. Brown into this, but why I don't consider him maybe that true blue 1 is I don't picture them lining up as an ISO receiver and just winning on those types of routes. That's not how they win. And that's fine. There's not a lot of guys that can do that. They're really hard to find. But that's why I think some of this, he's going to be a hype. He's in a Sean McVay offense, like St. Brown's in that Ben Johnson offense, but like where all of his touches are perfect. They're designed perfectly. So I don't think we're ever going to be in a world, as long as McVay's there and Stafford, or at least some quarterback answers there, where we're like, oh yeah, Puka Nacua really fell off. I think it's going to be impossible to maybe attain those highs, especially because, especially what the receivers went through last year, Cooper Kupp missing time. It kind of was just a perfect storm for Nacua touches. As before Demarcus Robinson became a thing for them. They were trying to make Tutu Atwell happen again. And like they really were. So that touches went to Nacua. I think some of that, and they hadn't figured out the run game. There's a lot of just variables as football is. I think this guy is very good though, and he's sticky and legitimate. I just don't think he has the speed and maybe that outside ability to be that number 1, but I think he's a firmly established number 2. Maybe pick 10's a little, like where did St. Brown go? 4? Split those 2, and that's where I consider these guys. Maybe a couple picks higher than 10 and everything, but I think it's very real because the offense is very real. I think it's sound. I think McVay loves him. As long as he stays healthy, he has a play style that's going to be sticky. Does he end up more like a Robert Woods? That's maybe his floor, I think, but that's a potential. That's like a 10-20% chance of him. I think it's maybe a Robert Woods plus is kind of like how his career kind of goes, because maybe it's just the role that he's in and I'm typecasting him, but it's just it has to be designed open a little bit more than maybe some of the high end guys.
I feel you. It just sounds.
I love Puka.
Right. Oh.
say. Having said it, in a real football sense, Puka is one of my favorites. But it's just in a fantasy and actually rating him, it's it's a little different.
It is. Look, the receiver position is really stocked. Okay, and by the way, if you go from this guy's a day 3 draft pick to now we're saying he is a tier 2 receiver in the NFL, that's enormous.
Firm tier 2.
Yeah, no question. I think he is firmly tier 2.
Yeah.
I don't think he is a tier 3 player. I think he's a step above that for sure. That's a huge compliment. Okay. That's a huge development, a huge thing. I just think it does to most people listening to this probably will sound funny to say like this guy had 1,486 yards and 6 touchdowns, 105 catches in the regular season last year. And we're maybe sort of saying he doesn't have that potential of a tier 1 player. I get that can be confused, but I also wouldn't be surprised if 1486 is his high watermark of his career. And by the way, that he could still go on to have a legitimately unbelievable career if that's the high watermark. Like he could be a 1,200 yard receiver every single year, and that would be fantastic. So I don't know. It's just interesting to consider him as a player for sure. I think that his year 2 looks from like reception perception standpoint. I think his year 1 looks maybe similar to like St. Brown's year 2. So I think that's an interesting comparison. I do see those guys both as tier 2 receivers, which Lions fans will absolutely destroy you for saying that.
I know. Oh my God. It's just take your wins. If I got a great player here and he's just because I know that some guys have just can't do some things. It happens. There's not a lot of guys that can do everything. It's really rare. I know. So sometimes that happens where I'm like, oh yeah, I would consider him a tier 2. And they're like, oh my God, you just act like the guy shouldn't be in the NFL. And I'm like, oh no, I love him. I loved St. Brown. Like these type of Puka Nacua, St. Brown are like literally my favorite type of receiver, power slots. I love guys that are willing to scrap and on the next play can run a corner route and beat a guy man to man. Like those are the coolest players. Godwin is another one. But yeah, it's just funny because I'm not going to confuse them for a Justin Jefferson or even this new version of CD Lamb or AJ Brown even or Tyreek Hill. Those guys are just, they win differently than these guys win.
I'm so with you. And it is sort of like the line from The Dark Knight, like you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. That is very much what it's like to be. I was a huge St. Brown guy as a prospect, was when all the other fantasy bros were like, he only produced at the end of the year because there was everybody else was hurt. It's like, no, that guy was excellent in that power slot role. You want to draft him in year 2. Now you sort of become the enemy there when you won't just push him to tier 1. But it's tough. I do think the tier 1 should be a select group. Okay. Last thing here, Nate, any other just sleepers you want to throw out? It could be from your team, other picks you really liked. Just those random under the radar players in Dynasty that really gets your juices flowing.
Oh, I got Jalen Polk from the Patriots. That fired me up, dude. I legit have him in every single Dynasty league I'm in. And I somehow, some way got him in every league. One league I had to trade up for him. One league I traded back for him. One league I just stand pat for him. Like I just ended up always getting him. Got him in this mock as well. I kind of just, when I'm drafting rookies in the startup league, I just draft my dudes. And so for me, I had Keon Coleman, AD Mitchell, and Jalen Polk. I liked all of them in real football terms. And it's 3 dart throws to me. It's my 3 favorite second round receivers. One has to hit, right? That's kind of my thinking, just different situations why I like them all. So I was pretty fired up about that. The other guy I wanted to go with over Tyler Lockett, but I was just a little bit of like, I already had too many dart throws maybe on the board. Or maybe in the air, I should say, Cedric Tillman for the Browns. That was one guy just because of his
classic Nate Tice, by the way.
Oh my God, dude. Reports are good. He's with the ones. He's the X. I know they have Amari Cooper. They have David Njoku. I don't know. There's a role for him that makes sense. His body, they're running a lot of types of these guys. I don't think he's ever going to be like a 1 or even a tier 2 or even a tier 3 receiver. But for fantasy purposes, I was willing to take that dart throw, but I did not take a dart throw. So I just want to throw that one out there. I'm trying to, that's really it. I bet on James Conner because I want some touches. I think, but Trey Benson's rocks. So I love Cardinals. That's really it. I got Nico Collins, which I was fired up about. And I couldn't wait to come on the show to tell you that I got Nico Collins. I was pretty fired up about that.
I loved how aggressive you were with Nico Collins. I absolutely loved to see that. I would have considered him at 3.08 had he fallen where I went with Travis Etienne.
Here. Oh yeah, Travis Etienne. How'd you end up with Travis Etienne? I was curious on your feel there. I'm stay away on the Jags right now. I just they're
I have two Jags
no flies.
I don't necessarily love that I have 2 Jags players, but
I like the bet on Thomas though, like that the number 1 for freaking Trevor Lawrence, who they just paid $200 something million. I wanted
to take a rookie at some point because I kind of had those like year 2, year 3 type of players at the receiver position. With ETN, honestly, man, this is just I wanted to take a running back. I don't necessarily know that I loved the ETN pick. I don't have like a strong take about him as a player. I don't even necessarily have a strong take about the Jaguars offense, but that's a great one. But this is generally just again how I build dynasty teams at the running back position. Very much like I'll think about this problem later. I wanted to get a guy that I do view as a bell cow. I think Travis Etienne, whether we think he should be or not, they keep trying to say that he's going to have competition for touches. I'll believe it when I see it. I think he's locked in to be a get running back 1 workload this year. I'll say that. And then the other guys I took like in round 9, I took Joe Mixon. In round 10, I took Najee Harris. Those are guys, again, I think there's some bankable touches this year. And the receiver room that I put together, I really like. So I think I can start to attack running back in year 2 of this league, in the rookie draft, in year 3, et cetera, et cetera.
That's a big point too, is look aheads too. It's a good running back class next year. For the 2025 draft. So not the worst class or draft if you're doing startup leagues right now to go receiver heavy, because next year's running back class is pretty damn good. Not quarterbacks though. I'll tell you that right now. It's looking dicey for QBs right now. I'm pulling at some threads. I'm trying to find some guys for everybody, but we'll see who emerges. But yeah, it's a good running back class next year. So not a bad strategy. I thought about that, but then I was like, will I ever get to explain this? My thinking for going 40 receivers at first.
I mean, that's generally the best way to do it, I think, is to build receiver heavy. I'll just throw out that two of the guys I took later, Josh Downs and Michael Wilson, I think are two of the more underrated second-year receivers coming in right now. Like I said, I think you and I could talk a lot about the Cardinals on tomorrow's Football 301, but I do think Wilson is getting slept on for what he did as a rookie. Impressed me playing multiple positions. He lined up mostly as the flanker and a little bit of like some power slot stuff when Marquise Brown was healthy and he was the X receiver. But then by the end of the year, the end of the year, you also saw him lining up as the X when Marquise Brown was out. And Kyler Murray trusted him in jump ball situations. He is a press man coverage beater. I think that's going to allow them to do some creative things with Marvin Harrison Jr. It's going to allow them to do some creative things with Trey McBride as well. So, yeah, like I said, I'm sure we'll be talking about Cardinals tomorrow. And Josh Downs, man, I've been confirmation bias overdosing on all the Josh Downs hype out of Colts camp right now. I think that guy is just a really good football player.
He's Mr. Reliable. There's something to be said with reliable guys. Like, that's why I like Polk, is like these guys always have a role. Like you're the receiver's best or quarterback's best friend on third down. You're going to always have a role. No, Downs is great. I really like that one. He was one I kind of was looking at late, but it kind of went askew there a little bit. Oh, the last thing I want to throw out is talking about just second year players. Zach Charbonnet is another one that I think over this year he'll get that backfield. I like Kenneth Walker. I shouldn't say I love him, but I like him. But he's so boom bust. He's just doesn't have great vision and everything. I think this coaching staff is going to value someone a little bit more reliable and someone that's truly a 3-down back. And so I think it's going to end up being Charbonnet's backfield over like when it's all said and done as the season goes along. That's kind of one of my lukewarm predictions for that backfield.
I think that's not a lukewarm prediction. I think that's a pretty spicy one.
Is that spicy? Okay. It's a new staff. It's Walker is this new staff with Grubb and this offensive line coach. I think they like reliable guys. They like guys that you're doing your thing right. Walker is the guy you throw in he should be a 30 to 40% touch guy. And then he should be with a guy that takes the majority load. So I think I see their splits flipping this year just because of that, because I see them going like, we want someone that's going to keep us on schedule and is a little bit better in pass protection too. That's what Charbonnet is. So new staff, new staff, man, everything's up in the air. These roles are way up there. So we'll just see how it kind of shakes out. But that's look for Charbo, my guy Charbo this year. I'm making this, I'm willing this into fruition. This is another guy way too many dynasty shares off, including in this league. So yeah, no, I'm willing this one up, but no, I actually have some real takes about why.
Well, the good news is this, the chapter on this league is closed. It's over. It doesn't actually matter, which is a shame because I do like our teams and I think it would be interesting to play out. But Nate, that's all we got, man. Appreciate it, buddy. This was awesome. I don't think we need to tell people where to find your work at this point and what you're working on because we talked about it enough. We're going to be doing the Football 301 show tomorrow. It's going to be great, and people should check that out. But anything else you're writing now for the site that people should keep an eye out for?
Did breakout players last week, which was a lot of fun. A little earlier than I wanted to, but it was still fun. Drake London was one of those. The guy we talked about today. Trey McBride was another one. We talked about him today. Jalen Warren from the Steelers was another one I brought up just because I think he's another guy that's going to take over that backfield in Pittsburgh. But yeah, those are guys. But this week, something Cardinals related, I'm sure. But yeah, check out Football 301. You'll hear Matt on there this week. You'll hear Charles McDonald on there later this week. And we did top offenses last week and top defenses. That was a lot of fun, actually. That got the juices flowing right because it got my mind back into take mode. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for training camp now. So I'm glad we got to do those. I kind of got to break the cobwebs wide open.
Hell yeah, feeling good. Like I said, we are football adjacent at the very least. And that feels a lot better than where we were maybe a month or two ago. That's going to do it for us today. Fantastic show. People can read Andy's recap of the mock draft and see the full draft if they want to check that out on the website. Speaking of Andy Behrens, he's going to be back on the show on Wednesday. He's going to join the pod to ID the 12 do's and don'ts when drafting this August as Strategy Week rolls on here. Until then, we're out.